All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scottsdale Unified School District's Town Hall on School Safety and Security. I'm Scott Menzel, Superintendent of the district, and I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to be here this evening as we engage in a conversation about the safety and security measures we have in place here in Scottsdale. I want to acknowledge the amazing partnership we have with Scottsdale Police Department, Paradise Valley, and the City of Phoenix, and also the staff that work for our district. Our Director of Security is here on the panel as well. We have people who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the children that come to school every day and the staff who work here are supported in a learning environment. But as you know, over the last few weeks, we've seen a significant increase in social media posts and swatting and things that have disrupted the learning environment. And we think it's really important to be able to respond to questions that you've submitted this evening. And so we're looking forward to a conversation where we can talk about the things that were submitted in the online questions. You can hear directly from law enforcement, our Director of Security, as well as myself, in answering the questions that you have. Safety and security for our students is absolutely a top priority. We are first and foremost in the business of educating students, but in order to be able to do that successfully, they need to come to school in an environment where they're safe and free from the kinds of threats that we've seen recently. And so with that, I would like to introduce our Director of Communications and Marketing, Christine Harrington, who's going to moderate the panel discussion this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Thank you all for being here tonight. To start us off, I'd also ask our panelists to introduce themselves, name, title, and how it is that they support student and staff safety here in Scottsdale Unified School District. Sergeant, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'm Kevin Albino. I'm a sergeant of the Scottsdale Police Department, and I oversee the school resource unit.
I'm Executive Assistant Chief Derek Elmore with the Phoenix Police Department. I have our operations sections, which includes the people who would respond to a school threat and also those who investigate it.
I'm Freeman Carney, the police chief of Paradise Valley. I've been in Paradise Valley for 13 years.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Walther. I'm the police chief for the City of Scottsdale Police Department. I've been the chief for going on 4 years, and I've been with Scottsdale PD since 1994, so 30 years ago this year.
I'm Josh Friedman. I'm the Director of Safety and Security for the Scottsdale School District, and I'm in my 3rd year.
Thank you, gentlemen. And again, thank you everyone for being here. I know students, staff, this is near and dear to our heart, community members. I'm a parent myself, so I'm very appreciative of everyone being here tonight to engage in this conversation. And thank you for your questions. We received in the last few days, I can tell you some real obvious themes emerged, and they are going to help guide us in tonight's conversation. There are some note cards in back if you had a chance. If you have a question that you don't hear asked and answered, we'll be able to take those note cards and answer some of those questions or respond later offline. So again, thank you for being here. We'll go ahead and get started. Chief Walther, we'll start with you. Can you discuss so just the topic being these recent trends in school threats. Right. Can you discuss the increase in these school threats and the way it's impacted local law enforcement specifically?
Certainly. So if you think about in terms of threats to schools, right? I grew up in the 80s. We were joking around about how this building was built in 1972 when I was 2. And things in the 80s, if you remember those of you around in the 80s, this is nothing new for us in terms of getting threats or schools getting threats. And back in my day, 80s, 90s, it was the proverbial bomb threat that nobody took seriously unless there was some other actionable intelligence for that. And so today, the threats have grown exponentially. The threats that are coming into school have gone up exponentially. And what we've seen really since the most recent mass shooting at a school in Georgia, we really have seen the numbers go through the roof, not just here and in the valley, but around the country. This has turned into an everyday occurrence. And we're seeing this almost every day in the valley and certainly every day in the state, but we're seeing this around the country. And so the threats are varying in nature. And I'll give you some ideas in the threats when we're talking about what threats we're looking at. So last week on two different days in a row, the threats that came into Sequoia Elementary School initially was somebody calling in. This wasn't a Instagram or TikTok or a photo shared from one location to another. And we can talk about, I know I heard Dr. Menzel talk earlier about report, don't repost. And we'll get into that, but this is not, what we had last week is not the case. right? At Sequoia Elementary, it was an actual person calling in saying, I'm in front of the school, now I'm going in and I'm going to conduct a mass killing or a mass shooting. So you're going to get a full police response in that. The very next day was here on this campus at Chaparral High School, and that too was a live person calling into the communications center, calls being transferred from, we can get into the technology component of another, but had this person calling from this school, I'm on site, and I have hostages in a bathroom, and that's what we responded to. And so your question really about the increase in those threats, the increase is significant. I mean, it's exponential in terms of the number that we're getting, and it's constant. Whether it be, the errant photo that shows up that has Arcadia High School on it, or an errant photo with a gun, or Desert Mountain High School on it, or Coronado High School on it, that are constantly being posted and reposted, and then the actual calls. The impact on law enforcement and obviously on your students and their mental health is significant. The resources that we throw at a problem, especially when we believe somebody is on campus and they say they're on campus, or we have intelligence that shows that they're on campus. I think we had at any one given time, we had more than 40 officers on this campus. And we had officers responding from all over our city, just responding to this campus. Why? Because we have to take that threat every single time very seriously. I think Dr. Menzel and I talked about it. If we had 100 days in a row of this call in our city, we would respond to the 101st day in the same way that we responded to day number 1. That's what you should expect from us. That's what you expect, I know, from all of my Valley partners here, my neighbors in Paradise Valley and Phoenix. We're going to respond to this the same way every time, because the one time we don't is the time that lives are lost. And so that's the impact that you have on law enforcement and the resources that we wind up throwing at this ever-growing problem.
It's a lot. Thank you, Chief. And I'm wondering too, while the bulk of our schools are in Scottsdale, clearly part of our district covers parts of Phoenix and Paradise Valley. So thank you for all the service that you provide our students and staff as well. And I'm curious if Scottsdale is an anomaly, or are we seeing this around the valley? Executive Assistant Chief Elmore, maybe you can tell us, are you seeing this around Phoenix in the Greater Valley?
Yeah, so this is not an anomaly. It's spreading across the nation, actually, from what we're talking to all of our peers throughout the nation. The threats have been on the increase. For Phoenix, for instance, we started our school threat program back in 2017, and since then we've been tracking threats. The most threats we've had before this past month was 43. This past month, only up till the 27th, we've had 79. So it's definitely on the increase and on the rise, more and more each time. I think part of it is the internet and the accessibility to the internet, and then that people keep propagating by reposting it, so it becomes a new threat, and then we have to investigate it like all over again, like it was all new again. So it is a problem throughout the valley.
Christine, if I can just add one little point to that, because after the Chaparral incident last week, the next day, the city of Mesa and Mesa PD responded to 6 different swatting calls, just the next day.
Wow.
And so that's the numbers that Chief Elmore's talking about. They're staggering numbers just here in the valley. So now, add that, 100-fold or 1,000-fold across the United States. It's definitely an issue.
Sergeant Bingham, correct me if I'm wrong, the bulk of these threats are not in fact tied to our district. In other words, they're not originating from a student, a staff member, a resident necessarily of our district. It sounds like maybe other districts are even getting the same exact threats.
Districts and even states. The very next day after Chaparral, I had an agency from, I believe, Tennessee contact me with information with almost the same exact threat. So obviously, just like Chief Walther mentioned, we're going to investigate each even if we have that information ahead of time, we're going to investigate each as it is, and we're going to deal with that information as it comes in to make sure that your students are safe. But it's definitely something that we're seeing again and reused again with the other Valley agencies.
So is this a new coordinated effort to instill fear?
That's a tough one. It's so new. It's definitely something we are looking at. We have intelligence units in all of our departments, and we're actively looking at those because with these last two that we had here in Scottsdale, they both originated from out of country. So we're definitely looking into that and seeing if there's something specific or some specific group that we need to really pay attention to.
Chief Carney, how do we maintain vigilance without becoming desensitized to the onslaught of threats?
Yeah, so similar to, I would say, how we train our officers, especially Scottsdale and Paradise Valley, fairly low crime considering, and we train real scenarios. We have protocols in place, we have policies in place, and we utilize those. And like Chief Walther alluded to, whether it's the 101st time call, we're going to respond. We're trained to treat every threat with the same level of professionalism and seriousness as the last, and so regardless of the outcome. So having said that, I would say similar with the students, staff, and parents, same thing. You have protocols in place, trust those protocols. You have policies and procedures in place. But even so, with that, you need to go a step further to train on that and scenario based. And I know they do those type of things. And we have trained with the Scottsdale Unified School District. We've utilized their schools for training, for our own teams training. And that helps with getting the layout of the school, helps with just our overall response to these types of calls. So we're ready for that. And so it's not about, you still want to be vigilant, but we don't need to be paranoid. You got to have that balance. And when you have that preparation and you're prepared through your policies, training, and you trust in those, you won't, it's not about being paranoid, it's about being confident and prepared if something like that were to ever happen.
Being prepared. Shifting gears just a little bit to the threat response and then the communication. Josh Friedman, Director of Safety and Security for Scottsdale Unified School District. What is the protocol when we become aware of a threatening social media post and one is identified?
Thanks. So any post or any threat that comes in, whether it's through a post or a verbal or however it comes in, is investigated thoroughly. So we start out by notifying our law enforcement partner. It could be as easy as the SRO that's already on the campus, or it could be a phone call to the supervisor, or however we need to do that. But initially, we start out with notifying police, making sure that the site administration is aware. Sometimes it comes in social media in the middle of the night, and we contact the principal so that they know what they're walking into the next day. And then once we have that, we work with our police partners, especially it can take on a life of its own, especially after hours. We get a threat that comes in at 5 o'clock on a Friday for Monday. We don't wait until Monday to investigate it. We work with our law enforcement partners all night, or as long as it takes until we get to a solution of that. And it could be overnight, it could be into the next morning. But we try to do that prior to school starting or as quick as we can. If it's on school, it's a lot easier because we have everybody present. So we take every threat the same way, no matter how it comes in. In the old days, it used to be the writing on the wall of the bathroom. We still take those serious, and we see those where we will find out, look at cameras, and do other investigative techniques to determine where they came from and pass it on to our law enforcement partners.
You covered this a little bit, but how do schools and law enforcement, or the district and law enforcement, really communicate and cooperate during these investigations?
So we have a great partnership. I know Sergeant Bingham and I are on opposite ends of the table right now, but usually we sit next to each other and we have phone conversations at least a couple times a day. And then for the other two agencies, for Phoenix Police and Paradise Valley, I have a person for each of those agencies that I contact all the time, and that we all work together to have the conversations. And we check in, like I said, at least daily, sometimes multiple times a day, to find out what's coming, what they've seen. Phoenix obviously covers a larger area than the other agencies, so they'll hear and see some things in other parts of the city before it even gets to us. So I've got a direct line, direct contact, no matter what hour of the day. I've been able to get in touch with and work with them on everything.
There's also the communication with parents that is so critical, and the communication with our staff members that are at the site and may be wondering what the heck is going on. How quickly are we able to notify our stakeholders about these potential threats and share with them what exactly is unfolding?
Our goal is to notify you as soon as we can. And what I mean by that is as soon as we get solid information that a school is going into lockdown or that we have a threat or what it is, our goal is to begin communicating. When we do have a school that goes into lockdown or shelter in place for a police incident, our goal is to communicate as soon as we have the facts and then to continue to communicate with. We try to keep it within 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes even less than that. And the goal is to, even if we just say there's no changes, we're still investigating, or there's no changes currently, just to let you know that we are out there and we are in contact with our law enforcement partners. The biggest challenge for us, I would say, is that especially when it's a scene like it was at Chaparral the other day, or when there's a threat and police take over, we defer to their public information officers. They're the ones, or whoever's in charge of the scene, that tells us what we can or cannot release, what's going on. So our goal is to communicate to parents every 10, 15 minutes at the most, and then when it's over, to give as much information as possible. And again, we have to vet that with the police department. Oftentimes we can tell you it's a hoax, but we can't tell you all the details until they allow us to, because they may still be investigating. So we try to do the best we can to communicate as often as we can.
And we know things can change and evolve, so we want to make sure that what we're sharing is the facts as we know them. Josh, if you can also explain for us, because many families now have experienced a lockdown, they've experienced a shelter in place, and I'm wondering if you could cover for us what those terms are, the different approaches, and when they're used.
So a lockdown is what it sounds like. Everybody goes to their location, usually it's a classroom, and they lock down. It's doors are locked, lights are off, and everybody hides out of sight. Whether that means they're in a corner, they're in a closet, they're keeping quiet. That's what a lockdown is. And a lockdown is typically only used when police department tells us to for an imminent threat or what they perceive could be an imminent threat on the campus. And then we have a shelter in place, which is we lock the doors and we don't let the students go from classroom to classroom or move about. We lock the doors, but teaching and learning can continue in that classroom. And the shelter in place can be used for any number of things. If we have a wild animal on campus or a medical issue on campus and they have to take somebody out on a gurney, we don't want students all out watching that. So we may shelter in place for a short period of time to allow the fire department to wheel somebody out on a gurney. But then a shelter in place can also be used in the event that we have a threat that's off campus. Maybe there's a burglary or something down the street and the police are going to that, or they're chasing somebody nearby. We can still teach and learn in the classrooms. There's no reason for them to hide and stay out of sight, but we don't want them walking around the campus or things like that. So that's the main difference between the two.
You may also be best poised to answer this question about how we're able to accommodate special needs students during these lockdowns or during times where we shelter in place.
So we have what's called individualized emergency plans for each student that has special needs on our campuses. And special needs may be a medical condition, or it may just be they're in a wheelchair, or an athlete that broke their foot and is on crutches. So we have plans for all those students. They're kept in the office, and we have them available that should we go into a lockdown, or should we shelter in place, or have to evacuate the students, that we have that information available to give to our law enforcement and fire department partners so that they know what to expect when they're going into a classroom or transporting people off the campus through to do an evacuation. So all of that information is gathered and updated more than once a year, and then we take that with us, and so we have all the information ahead of time.
Chief Walther, we heard a little bit about why it's so important that some of these posts on social media not be shared, that in fact they be reported and not reposted. Talk to us about what the message is for students, for parents, for anyone who's aware of something. What is the best advice for them, and is there a way parents can help monitor that social media?
How long do you have? Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, I will give a shout out to Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell, who really started a campaign called Report, Don't Repost. And that really was born out of what we're seeing in the law enforcement space, which is the same pictures of guns or threats reposted, not just in the Valley, but around the country. And so kids are then just scrubbing names of different schools off of those posts and putting that on on a different school, right? And that gets to that school, and before you know it, Sergeant Bingham and his staff and my criminal intelligence unit are working with Paradise Valley and Phoenix PD and others and our federal partners working on this information to see did it come from one of our local students, and oftentimes it did not. It came from Texas or Louisiana or somewhere else in the country, and it takes time to track all of that information down. So the idea of report that, don't repost it. If that comes into one of your feeds or is sent to you or reposted to one of your feeds, that's the time to break that chain and report that either to the school or to the police department so that we can start looking at that and we can let staff know at the individual schools that may or may not be mentioned in those posts that this is where it came from. This is a post from 3 weeks ago, which happens often, that has now just been reposted so many times and different names changed on that. And so that's why it's important to just report that and get with your students, your young people, your kids to say, listen, this is not something that should be reposted. It's something that we should report right away. Let's get involved in that. And the discussion then that I think takes a lot longer is, what's that parent involvement look like? Hey, I'm going to be honest with you folks. I'm very fortunate that my kids are all older. I think that my kids, when they were teenagers, MySpace was the thing that really started to hit, and then Facebook. You're dealing with something that is unbelievably difficult with your young people in terms of whether it's TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram or any of the myriad other platforms out there, and they can communicate privately with one another with other apps, right? And so that makes it even more difficult. So I don't envy the position that you're in, especially now as my grandchildren continue to get older and want phones and they want to be part of that same space as well. And so we have to be involved. We have to be involved. I will tell you that then there's some of you, I think, and without calling any of you out, there are some of you out there, if you grew up in the Valley like I did, at 10 o'clock at night in the 80s, so 10 o'clock, the TV's on, and there was a commercial that said, ding dong, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Right, that's growing up in the 80s, right? Kids were pretty feral, you didn't know, they just were out and about. And so I would use that same thought process with your own parenting is, hey, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know what social media site your kids are on their phones in their bedroom while they're doing homework? I don't envy you the position that you're in, but do you know their connectivity? What is your connectivity with your teens in particular? And so do you know what's going out there? I will tell you that I had this discussion at length on the Mike Broomhead show a long time, probably now more than 18 months ago, about human trafficking and sex trafficking. And so the discussion then was the same. We're talking about different topics, but it was the same because it was, do you know who your kids are talking to online? Because if you don't know who your kids are talking to online, that's how groomers and predators reach out to your children, through this. And so it's no different that, who are your kids talking to? What groups are they affiliated with? Are they upset? Are they disaffected? Were they bullied? Is there some reason that would cause them to lash out or shut down an entire learning institution with a threat of violence? So those are the things that we have to get in today. And again, I don't envy the position that you're in or that my grown children, as their kids get older, are in, because we're going to be dealing with this for the next entire generation. So what does that look like in terms of the relationship that you have with your kids, that your kids have with you, and the amount of time that you spend in conversation with them about what they're doing in their online life? There is a real life, and then there is their virtual life. And that's what we have to get into. That's the scariest part of what's going on, I think, in our country and the world right now, is what's going on in their virtual life, and how upset are they at what's going on in their virtual life, that they're willing to make a threat. But by no means, they're not the only ones. Kevin talked about the fact that the Chaparral call in particular, we don't believe even originated in this country. And that same caller hit 2 other schools in 2 other states. That's what we know today, right? And so are there young people involved in this? Is your young person one of them, or could they be? Is that worthy of a significant conversation and a participation to an even greater degree in their online life? Then are there what I'll call domestic terrorists or hackers that are interested in just sowing the seeds of discontent and angst and anger amongst our young people and doing even more damage than what we saw in the pandemic in 2020 and civil unrest and all of those things. So those are things that we're looking at. Or are they sponsored outside of this country? Again, we sit about a month away from a national election, and can we continue to create this division? So there's an opportunity, I think, for a lot of discussion about what's going on in young people's real lives, and most importantly, what's going on in their virtual life. I think those things are very important.
Chief Carney, we hear sometimes from, Chief Carney, we hear sometimes from families who say, well, I posted it because I wanted to warn my friends and family, or that's why I posted it so my friends would know, or that's why I was talking about it on the playground, not because I have any firsthand information, but because this is what I overheard and I just want to take care of everyone. Is that necessarily the best approach, or what would you suggest that our students and staff do as opposed to having the conversation on the playground maybe?
When they see these types of posts or see...
Or hear anything, see something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it goes, you guys know this, it goes back to hear something, say something. And that has to do with education, educating our kids, our staff, our parents, that you can have the rumor mill go to this, and before you know it, forth down the line, a simple... someone's mad at someone is someone's going to shoot someone up, because we let it go to that. So we got to go right to the source and address it right away. That's what we do at my own department. If there's rumors, we're supposed to go right to the source and figure it out before it turns into something bigger than it really is. So yeah, report it.
The best way to protect your friends and family is to report it, not to just give them a heads up, but rather to engage with law enforcement. So Executive Assistant Chief Al Moore, there are some pretty significant penalties that can come along with sharing one of these posts or creating or originating it. School discipline, of course, is outlined in the Student Code of Conduct, but there can be criminal and even financial penalties, right?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. So there's a variety of things that kids can be charged with. And if they are resharing posts, they can be charged with that as well. So that's why it's important to have them not to try to get that information out to their friends, but to report it, so that way they don't get in trouble in the end. It could be anything from threatening and intimidating, misdemeanor or felony, depending on what the threat was. There's interference with an educational institution, both misdemeanor and felony as well. Use of electronic communication to terrorize, intimidate, or threaten or harass, that's a misdemeanor. Computer tampering, which is a felony. There could be harassment, a misdemeanor. Making a terrorist threat, a felony, that's one that we charge more than any of the other ones about, is that felony one. Could be misconduct involving weapons, also a felony if there's a weapon that is actually involved in it. And then minor prohibited for carrying a weapon, someone under 18 doing that. So those penalties vary in time and all that other stuff. With kids, also getting that record on them can prevent them later on from getting into college, getting the jobs and everything else that they want. So we want to make sure that the parents are involved with them early on and educating them on what the right thing is and the right way to go, because it's so important not to have those kind of marks on your record. Some of the, I think the financial penalties, they can be up to $10,000 on a civil damage charge on any of this stuff, on any one given incident. So if you have multiple incidents where they use that threat in multiple places, it could compound as you go on with that as well. So, and then also, I know in Phoenix, our SROs work very closely with the schools and the school districts to determine whether or not what the school's going to do as far as discipline. And there's times when things happen and, we try to use common sense. And if we talk to the school and we think that an expulsion, a suspension, or something like that's gonna do it, and that's it, then that's what we'll do. But with the increase in all this stuff lately, we've kind of switched and changed that. If we have enough probable cause, we're going to book the student no matter what, just because. We want them off the street in a way and not being able to commit that crime.
Dr. Menzel, there's so much to consider as it relates to school safety and security and how we balance the learning environment. We want to be warm and welcoming to our students to come and engage with us every day, but we also want it to be a secure place for them to learn. How do we maintain that positive learning environment and still implement the necessary security measures?
So there are steps that we put in place post the Uvalde shooting, and we did that in partnership with conversations with Scottsdale Police Department. Josh Friedman came on board as our Director of Security, and they're really pretty simple and straightforward. Doors need to be locked. We have secure front entrances. They've all been retrofitted and updated thanks to the generosity of the voters here in Scottsdale. We need to then follow the proper protocol so that we know who's on our campus at all times. We expect that our students and staff are wearing their IDs. That lets people know that you're someone who's supposed to be on campus at all times. One of the biggest points of vulnerability are when gates or doors are propped open. And so the Dig It campaign was doors, IDs, gates. We need to make sure that they're either properly staffed when people are coming in at the time of arrival or dismissal, or they're locked and secured. The other part is about IT. We see so many things that happen in the IT world. If someone's not protecting their password, someone can assume your identity. We have a real concern about deep fakes and the kinds of threats that are possible in this environment with AI. But as Chief told us when we had our opening day a few years ago, the most important part of security are the people in the system. If we are paying attention to the protocols that are in place and we're observant to the potential threats that are there, we will minimize the risk. But no matter what we do, we cannot eliminate the risk. You can put barbed wire fences around our campuses, and someone who has bad intentions can find another way around that security perimeter. So we want our schools to be safe, welcoming, nurturing environments. And if we follow the basic security protocols, we're going to be in a good position to respond if someone with bad intentions shows up on our campus. But it's about finding that balance and ensuring that our students don't come to school with this sense of fear. It's really difficult when you have the cortisol level elevated because you're afraid to be able to process the academic content that they're expected to learn. And so there is a balancing act here, and I don't believe we should allow the people who would disrupt our learning environment to have power over our kids when they come to school by perpetuating the social media threats that are hoaxes. And I'm grateful for the prosecutor and law enforcement for identifying who they are and then working to hold people accountable.
We also received a number of questions with regard to increasing mental health resources in our schools, so the potential for identifying a problem before it becomes irreparable, and then additionally about how we get more SROs or armed security. So we'll start first with the mental health. Dr. Menzel, are there plans to increase the mental health resources, and or can you even tell us what we already have in place, because it's quite robust?
So we are fortunate in Scottsdale that through a grant from the Arizona Department of Education, we have social workers on every campus. But we typically, for mental health issues, are going to need to refer people to outside experts. But that doesn't stop any staff member who has a concern about a student who might be struggling with any number of things, whether it's a counselor, a social worker, a teacher, an administrator, from connecting that individual with other resources. There's no shortage of nonprofits and others who are committed to addressing mental health concerns with our young population. Post-COVID, we see an increase in some of these challenges. And what we can't do is pretend that they don't exist. We also need to make sure that individuals who are struggling with mental health issues don't have access to unsecured weapons, because that combination is the most serious threat from a safety perspective, to ensure that we're having our students get the mental health support they need and ensure they don't have access to weapons that could take the lives of others. And so it's that balancing act. We are trying to be attuned to the needs of the whole child. Our primary purpose is education, but just like a hungry kid isn't going to learn well, a kid who's struggling with mental health issues also needs to get that proper support, and we try to pay attention to those signals and refer them out appropriately.
You may want to weigh in on this, but otherwise, Chief Walther, we'll start with you. How do we get an SRO on every campus, or is that even what makes sense, or armed security guards?
That's the, I think, the million-dollar question, right? Is there an opportunity for a school resource officer on every campus? And I will tell you, and I'm going to play off something Dr. Menzel talked about, is that really the front line of defense on any school campus is access control, period. I will tell you that at Chaparral last week, and I think he's there, Officer Devin Lyons is in the back. He doesn't have his better half, his dog Rocket, with him tonight, but I will tell you that he is the SRO on this campus, and he was here when this call came out, and he was clearing bathrooms, literally, because that's where the suspect on the phone said that they were held up in a bathroom. Devin was clearing bathrooms within seconds of the call coming out. Now, I just want you to think about that in terms of, had there been a shooter somewhere actually on this campus, Devin's here. But what's his response time? It's going to be several seconds, depending on how far across the campus he's going to be. But that's still going to, if you have an active shooter here, that's still going to very negatively impact our students and staff here, even by the time he gets them. I had a motor officer who was literally across the street and was on scene. I had dozens of officers here within scant minutes. But the reality is that you're only as good. I can't have, even campus this size, I just cannot have, 20 officers here to cover every corner of this campus. Chief Elmore can speak to this, but even in my own city, I had Kevin pull up the numbers of schools, and let's just say between SUSD, Cave Creek Unified, the small contingent of Paradise Valley Unified, parochial schools, private schools, and charter schools, we're talking about roughly about 60 schools. I think in Phoenix it's probably 400. Yeah, more. And so think about that in terms of how many school resource officers we would have to hire to try to put at least one officer at every single school. I'll tell you right now, and there'll be groans and moans, I have 10. Right, I have 10 school resource officers and the sergeant, and they're responsible for covering those areas. Now, I have a lot of patrol officers that fill in those gaps as well, and we've been talking about more. I have 3 SSO, school safety officers at 3 other schools in Scottsdale proper. But that's the discussion. How many more would you need? If I need to hire, if there's funding, to hire 50 more police officers, my fellow chiefs here would tell you how long it's going to take to hire 50 more officers specific to just that issue. And I won't call Chief Elmore out on the, but he knows, and looking at hundreds of vacancies, trying to fill now 50 or 100 or 150 more to cover schools in the city of Phoenix, or 50 more to cover the schools in the city of Scottsdale, is a Herculean effort. That's why access control is so important. That is the frontline defense in any school, is access control. If you look at any of the investigations into a lot of the school shootings that have occurred in this country, especially over the last 20 years, 25 years, what you're going to find is a significant lapse in access control. Doors that should have been locked were left unlocked. Doors that should have been closed were propped open because of the convenience of staff, or a child opened the door and left it open. Gates that should have been closed and locked were left open. That's what these people are looking for. They're looking for immediate and easy access to the campus where they can get involved in killing as many people as possible within a very, very, very short window of time. I'll tell you, if you look at a lot of the cases, or the vast majority of the cases, and almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them, the killing is done by the time the police actually go on scene to engage the suspect. And so that's why access control is paramount. And all of the things that Dr. Menzel and I and Josh, Kevin, that we've talked about over the 4 years that I've been the police chief, and all the things that have been implemented to make the schools safer, but access control is the big one. The next really thing is armed security. We've talked about armed security, very popular in Israel, where every school has an armed security personnel, and we've talked about that. I just don't know how the amount of training that that I think we would all feel comfortable with is pretty significant. And so while that's certainly a discussion point, it's just not one that's gained a lot of traction in the United States.
Can I add that one of the things that we have on our campuses is security cameras, both internal to the campus as well as external. Those security cameras help us lay eyes on the campus in a real-time situation very quickly. Real-time crime scene has access, so if there's an emerging situation, the police department doesn't have to wait and figure out how to get into our system. They can get into our system. And I think it might be helpful if Josh and or the chief would talk about the exercise we did a couple of years ago with an actual planned tabletop exercise that was supposed to go several hours, and we utilized the system for the first time.
It's a perfect example because my partners from Paradise Valley and Phoenix were involved in that as well. And Dr. Menzel's correct is that we have, I think, one of the cutting-edge real-time crime center in with Scottsdale Police Department in our communications center, out of our communications center, where we're bringing in just under 6,000 camera feeds from all around the city, both private and public partnerships, right? So within the city, all of our traffic management cameras, our license plate reader cameras, but the private partnership in that is we bring in all Scottsdale Unified and Cave Creek Unified School District cameras. So if there's a call on this campus, my real-time crime center, real-time crime center, there's too many, we like our acronyms. Real-time crime center technicians will immediately pull up all of the cameras. In fact, I was up in the real-time crime center during the Sequoia Elementary School incident, and all of their cameras were pulled up on the screen, and they were looking at cameras to see if there were in fact people there. And so the incident or the the scenario that we developed for 4 hours at Cochise was really about responding to an active shooter, and we wanted to build that scenario real life. So not only, when you have an active shooter at a school, not only is Scottsdale PD going to respond, Phoenix PD is going to respond, Paradise Valley is going to respond, DPS, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And so we had all of them respond to the scenario as if it was going on live. Now, everybody knew that it was going on, but we brought in on a weekend, we brought in SUSD personnel, teachers and staff and students and makeup, and it was a full-blown exercise that we planned for 4 hours. It went about, Josh, would you say it went like an hour and a half? No, 12 minutes, because it was the first time that we tested our theory that if the real-time crime center technicians at the Scottsdale Police Department had video from the schools, they would be able to more accurately direct officers to the location of the suspects. And sure enough, we planned out 3 suspects for that. The officers started responding. The first voice I heard was not the dispatcher after the call was dispatched. It was the real-time crime center technician saying, I have a suspect. He's by building G. He's wearing this, and directed the responding officers, who immediately engaged that suspect in gunfire, put him down. He said, suspect number 2 is a white male wearing this. He's got a long gun. He's behind a tree in the center of the courtyard. Officers moved immediately to that area, engaged that suspect in gunfire, put him down. And then we wanted to test, very Uvalde style, we wanted to test if there was another gunman who forced their way into a classroom with your students. We carry a lot of mechanical breaching equipment to get through doors. And so the goal was to have this suspect move to a classroom where there are actors as kids, get into that classroom and see how the officers who had responded would deal with that. And we were never able to test that because the officers moved in from all of our departments so quickly that the real-time crime center technician said, okay, 3rd suspect is on the catwalk moving toward this classroom, and the officers engaged that suspect prior to him getting to that door and put them down. And so what we realized was that what we had planned out, what we had thought in theory would really work for us, worked out in practice as well, is that the quicker we can get eyes into this campus and in the schools or the Boys and Girls Club or Fashion Square or all of these major partners that we have, the quicker we get eyes on, whether they be in a parking garage and we get or license plate reader and we capture a homicide suspect out in New York, and that's what we did with that technology. The quicker we can bring that technology to bear, the quicker we can resolve an issue, the quicker we can put down somebody who has a great intent to do harm or who has intent to commit crimes in our city. And so that was a real success for the Real-Time Crime Center and our partnership with the SUSD.
The cameras make for many more eyes on our campuses all the time.
Yes.
Yes, Sergeant.
And just to kind of let everyone know, as we work with SUSD to make these access much difficult, they're also working with us to allow us access. So I will tell you with the Chaparral, and because of the work we did ahead of time, those 30, 40 officers that showed up for Chaparral had no issues getting to the school and getting to need where they go because of the stuff we worked with them. So as that develops, we're working with them too to make sure that we still have access and easy access to get to the problem as quick as possible.
So we've all become accustomed to going through metal detectors to go to special events or concerts, and now there are weapon detection systems that are a little less obvious, easier to navigate sometimes. And recently we've piloted a couple different products here in the district at a Chaparral football game, in fact, metal detectors, and last weekend at Arcadia, a weapons detection system. Josh, can you tell us about those specific, I guess, products, and then additionally, what we've learned or stand to learn?
Yeah, so we've been looking at products for about a year now, and the ones that we used at the Chaparral football game were true metal detectors like you've seen anywhere. You have to empty your pockets, everything comes out, and they worked great. We were able to catch a lot of different things, but it also caused a huge backup to get into the game, which the parents, spectators, everybody that was there, it was really not an issue. Everybody was just thankful we were doing it. And the detectors that we're currently testing out are different. They're a weapons detection system, so there's a lot of AI built into it. Well, and what that means is it only picks up weapons. So you don't have to empty everything out of your pockets. You can walk through with your cell phone, your keys, all that kind of stuff. But if you do have a weapon, it will pick it up. And so we used those last week at Arcadia High School. And there's a bunch of different brands and different types out there. So we'll continue to test different ones over the course of the next few weeks or months and figure out which ones we like best, and then it'll become an issue later on once we determine what it is and where we're going to move forward with it.
Anything to add? Anyone, have you seen these work elsewhere? Is this a viable option or costly option?
I didn't see that. I was at Arcadia, so I'd love it. It's great for us. I think it's when you're really talking about force multipliers. You know, can we leverage technology? And we can get into, I think, a great discussion about leveraging the technology, be it cameras, drones, weapons detection systems, access control points. I think leveraging all of those is the real key to the success here.
We know recruiting is hard in education, it's hard in law enforcement, true, but if we were able to find officers, if we were able to find armed security, is it something that individual schools or parents could help pool resources to finance some of these additional enhancements? Dr. Menzel.
So we get a lot of questions about, can a PTO raise money for? And per board policy, there are some situations where funding can be provided for staff members, but that's a challenge because a particular group of parents might be passionate about something, be able to raise the money and support a position for a year or 2 years. But how do you sustain that over time? And then if you can get that in 2 or 3 of our elementaries, but not the other 12 or 13, is that equitable across our schools? So from a district perspective, we need to identify what are the appropriate strategies, how do we budget accordingly in order to support those things. It's a whole lot easier if you're paying for a thing that we might have to maintain versus a person, which is ongoing commitment of resources. So it's a balancing act. The district has prioritized security, which is why we have SROs at our 5 high schools and our middle schools. It's why we have security staff at all of those schools. It's why we rotate security staff with our elementary buildings. We've invested more over the last 3 years in security in order to address these concerns. The budget is not infinite. And so it is a matter of how do we address all of these things using the resources we have, leveraging the technology when and where we can. And so those conversations are ongoing. One of the potentials that I would encourage PTOs to think about, instead of just saying, can I do something for my campus? Recognize that when we are as a unified district needing to ensure that every child in Scottsdale Unified is able to go to school and feel safe, that maybe there's a collective effort that's beyond just the individual school. And that can take shape in many different forms. It could be ongoing fundraising of the PTOs, but it could also be, as we think about the next bond issue, what are the investments that we need to make in our facilities to address that? And so there's going to be an opportunity for community conversation about what those priorities are. And we have regular conversation with law enforcement officials. So every time we have one of these incidents, we spend time in an after-action review with the staff on site, with our law enforcement partners, and with our security staff to say, okay, what went well? Where can we improve? Our communication team is absolutely involved in all of this. And I have to give a shout out to Christine and Nancy and Victor and Emilio and all of the people on the team who help make sure behind the scenes we're pushing out information to our parents. When people are responding to a real-time threat, they need to focus on what's happening on the campus. We have people in the district office who are working to make sure that that communication is timely and frequent. And so it's about everyone working together to ensure that we're giving parents what they need, that we're communicating timely and effectively. We're utilizing technology through Parent Square, so we don't have to do a fan out, and you know how the game of telephone works. And so we're trying to make sure that everyone gets the same message and that that's consistent over time.
So we've covered the bulk, in fact, of our questions, including those that I still have on the list. But Sergeant Bingham, earlier today, we did discuss sort of the different types of threats and how the response might be a little different. I don't know if you care to elaborate on that specifically, sort of the social media post versus something that was heard or seen on campus versus the swatting calls that we saw last week, and how we all collectively respond.
Yeah, so we usually basically see three different types of threats when we're dealing with school threats. One is going to be your swatting call. We don't see that often, and hopefully we don't see that trend continue, but that may continue from there. The second is a social media post. So we obviously see a large increase in that when we have a school shooting somewhere in the nation. And unfortunately, some of that is students going, oh, I don't want to go into school today, so I'm going to make this post. And that's how they start. Or again, like Chief mentioned, they'll start in one state, and then it just gets changed around and shared because we're social media, and it just slowly moves across the country from there. So that's the other threat. And that one's, again, more resource heavy, but we can track that, again, usually to a point, but usually not to actual individuals. So those are a little bit more harder to investigate, but we still do it, and we still can find people from time to time, but not every single one. Our third threat is usually that comes from the school. So this can either just come from a student joking around at recess and make a comment, or get mad at someone and mention a gun or mention they're going to shoot somebody, and we need to investigate that. Or they draw something that someone feel may be a threat. So you have the stuff that happens in school, the social media ones, and again, the swatting calls. And again, like we mentioned several times before, this is something that we look at each one individually. We take them all seriously. Josh and I, especially over this past month, many times we've been on the phone call 1 o'clock in the morning addressing these issues because if we can get it figured out before school starts, that's what we want to do. So I work with our patrol officers to make sure those get investigated. And again, helping that, reporting that to us helps the most, because usually what we see, especially with the in-school ones, is the rumors, and then 6 people have heard it, and then now we have to track those 6 people down, and we do that. We go to people's houses at 1 o'clock in the morning and wake people up and find out where this came from, so we can now track it down to the next person so we can find out where that comes from. So we have those 3 different posts. So the more people report them ahead of time, the faster we can get on them and start looking into them, because again, we are going to treat each threat as a serious threat until we can deem it otherwise. And then again, when we get the more information, a lot of times, luckily, these ones that happen in the school, a complete joke, or people were just joking around and someone overheard them. And again, it's still an issue, but it may not rise to the level of a criminal issue, but it's going to rise to something that the school district's going to take care of. So those are the 3 that we see a lot, and then again, we deal with each one the same until we can deem it otherwise not credible.
Josh?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, and that is that the posts that start out of state and continue across. So, we've seen some that, let's just say they start in Florida, because at least a bunch of them that we've seen. When it comes to us, that doesn't mean we just say, oh, okay, it started in Florida, and the school name may have changed or there may be little differences in it. We investigate that back to figure out where the change was made or how it got to our school, our state. So yes, the police departments keep a database of all these posts, and it may look exactly the same, except instead of the black bar in the middle saying a school name in Florida or Arkansas or whatever else, the black bar now says one of our schools. They still go back and try and figure out how that got here, who changed that last piece of information to make it ours. So just because, as they said, that we know that it started somewhere else, it doesn't mean that we stop investigating. We continue to get all the way to the end to try and make sure that we figure out who made it here and who brought it here.
Christine, do you mind if I add just a little bit to what both of them are talking about too, in terms of, it's interesting, we put out a lot in the PD, we put out a lot of social media, a lot of information on our social media posts. We did on the Chaparral call, on the Sequoia call, put information out so you have information in addition to what you're already getting from SUSD. What's interesting though is that the comments that we'll get on our posts run the gamut, and they're fairly interesting. And so I'll share with you that to our Chaparral response, Sequoia and Chaparral, since both callers reported being on campus, we'll throw a lot of resources at that. And I had somebody post, don't you think that your response was a little too much to a hoax? Well, did we know it was a hoax at the time? Of course we did. And would you expect our response to be any less than everything we have? Right? And another post also related to Chaparral was, why name it? Why did you identify the school? Isn't that going to traumatize, our students more who attend that school? Do you see how we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't? And the reality is that we collectively in the community, we have to build more resilience in our young people. Right? This is the world that we have chosen to make for ourselves. And I always hold this thing up as my example, is that this is what we've chosen to do. This is how we communicate today. And so because this is how we communicate, and we post and we social media and we get information out in as timely fashion as possible, we have to build that resilience into our kids, and we have to build that resilience into ourselves. If your expectation is that when we respond in mass to what we believe is somebody on campus getting ready and are able to do harm to your kids, you better believe I'm going to throw everything that I have at it. We only threw 40 because with people like officers like Devin Lyons and others who are on this campus or got to this campus so quickly, and great intel coming in from my criminal intelligence unit and communications, quickly we found out that this person was not on scene. Otherwise, we would have thrown 60 or 70 at the problem. And that should be your expectation always. And I'm not talking about the picture, the post, of a gun that's been circulating the internet for 3 weeks. I'm talking about when we have actionable intelligence, or we believe somebody is actually here. That's how we're going to respond. And that's how you should expect us to respond every single time, regardless of what the social media trolls talk about in terms of, well, you kind of responded in too harsh of a fashion. That's just the reality of what we do, and you should expect no less from us. But I think that there is an opportunity when people are like, well, you shouldn't name the school, and you're going to traumatize our kids more. That's an opportunity to build in a little bit more resilience amongst our young people, and I think that there's an opportunity for us to do that.
As a parent first, thank you. That's the kind of response that makes me feel better. Additionally, to the principals and teachers and staff members in the room, thank you, because there's a lot of training that we know goes on in the classroom and at our sites. A lot of that deployed in part by Josh and his team. And so thank you for making sure that our students are prepared and know how to navigate these things. And that does mean having drills. Josh, we've not yet covered what that training looks like for our staff, for our students, and what those drills entail.
So we do annual training to all staff. There's at least a 1 hour in-person, must-be-done training every year, as well as a several hour online training that has to be done by all staff. And then throughout the year, we meet with various staff groups and go through and answer questions. And then each site is required to do 3 types of drills. The first one is the evacuation drill, and that's like the old fire drills we used to do when we were kids, and those are required by law to be done monthly. And so they do an evacuation drill every month. The second type of drill is the shelter in place drill, and they're required to do 2 of those a year. And at least one of those has to be done during a non-typical classroom period. So that could be during lunch, it could be during a passing period, it could be in the morning when everybody's there on campus but milling around. They can't do it, every one of those planned in the classroom. And then also they're required to do 3 lockdown drills. And the 3 lockdown drills, again, at least one of them has to be done during a non-classroom period. So it could be during lunch, it could be during those passing periods. And after each one of these drills, there's a after action report that's done where we sit down and talk about things that went well, things that didn't go so well. We meet with the staff, we talk to the administration on the sites, and we try and figure out things that need to be improved moving forward. So that we can learn from each drill and each unfortunate occurrence. And the interesting thing is the Phoenix police sergeant that works with our Phoenix schools, our SRO sergeant, has said that we're really good for not being good at it. And the reason he says that is because we don't practice it like some other districts do. We don't have an incident every day, every week. You know, there are some districts and some schools that he has in Phoenix that have occurrences more often than we do. And so they're really good at certain things. But for us, he has always told us that we do an amazing job with being drilled, 3 to 4 to 5 times a month, or I'm sorry, a year, as opposed to, schools that have a lockdown every week because somebody reports a weapon or something like that. So we need to use every drill that we do, every occurrence that happens as a learning experience. We're not great at it. We will always get better. There's always things you can do. And so we continue to work on that. But we do train not just with the staff, we train with the students. They're taught in the first, within 10 days of school starting, they have to have a lesson with each of the children to make sure that they understand what the lockdowns are and what they're supposed to do during a lockdown, an evacuation, or a shelter-in-place drill. And then again, after each one, the teachers go over with the students and make sure that they understand things that may have gone wrong or things that can go better. And kids are kids, and sometimes they behave and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. So every drill that is gone over, or after every drill, they go over what happened and the good and the bad so that the kids and the staff can learn from it.
Nancy, I have not received any additional questions. That is pretty much going to wrap up what we gathered from our stakeholders in the last couple days. So I'm going to turn it to the chiefs if y'all have a closing comment or a key takeaway. And Chief Elmer, we could start with you if you want to share with us anything we need to know.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that Chief Walters talked about earlier is just being involved with your students and your kids. I have 4 children myself. Mine are all older too, so I'm more looking at my grandkids as well. But just being involved with them and knowing what's going on in their lives will help with all of this stuff as we go forward, and making sure that they understand what the plan is and understand what our response is as well, and how we will respond to that, and that we care enough to send 40 when it's maybe just a hoax, but we don't care about that. It's about making sure that everyone's safe. And so I think that's the important takeaway from this, is just being involved with your kids, being involved with their social medias, letting them have the opportunity to just talk to you and be able to listen without judgment. A lot of times helps and goes a long way. So please continue to be involved.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would, I'll just say, the 40 that responded the other day with that technology that Scottsdale PD has and the police departments have, if without that technology or any more intel that they received, you better believe my team's coming, Phoenix's team's coming, and there's going to be hundreds very quickly. So as far as the professionalism of our police officers and the training we have and the networking and collaboration we do with each other, the resources are there and the technology is there to help. But as far as the kids go, and these swatting calls and these hoax calls, know that it's not just schools. We get them at houses, swatting at houses. We get them at churches in our town as well. So it happens. It's not school specific. But what you can do is educate your kids, not instill fear, but resilience and training and education will go a long ways. The crimes and statutes that he was talking about, there's 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds getting arrested for this, and over usually it's a prank or a dare. I dare you to call this or do this. And as you I'm glad I wasn't raised in this time frame, because I like to, if I got challenged or something, I kind of wanted to try it. So and I don't want to see kids going down that route, but as you educate them on the penalties now, they'll tell their friends. They won't be egging on their friends. Yeah, do it. I dare you. Because when we were kids, a dare, you didn't want to back down and be chicken, right? And we don't want that to. And through education, that's less likely to happen. So teach your kids. That's serious. There's 12-year-olds going to jail. A handful of years ago, a young guy, 20 years in prison over a hoax call. It ended badly. So there's serious consequences for this. So education is huge, and just know we're here for you and ready to serve. So thanks.
In the crowd, there are parents, there are students. I see young people in here, and there's certainly staff here from SUSD. And I have talked about, Dr. Menzel talked about after Uvalde, and I opened up the school year one year with a discussion. And one of the points that I made then, and I want to make with all of you, is about the idea of vigilance. It's hypervigilance cannot be maintained, and I know I've seen a lot of parents over my career, and certainly the 4 years that I've been the chief, and the more we see these type of incidents, I see what I recognize as a look of hypervigilance on the face of parents, and the face of students, and the face of staff. It's not possible to maintain hypervigilance over a long period of time. You will burn out, and you will burn out quickly. But you can, as parents and as staff members and as kids, you can maintain what I refer to as optimistic vigilance, right? It's okay to be vigilant. It's okay to look at the world and say, there's some things that are a little messed up, especially when it comes to this device and the social media. There are some things that you want to be vigilant about. There are relationships in your families with your kids that you want to be vigilant about, and you want to be optimistically vigilant. You want to have these hard discussions. One of my commanders who's here, I think you see him in the back, Commander Chris Coffey, sent me this week a pretty interesting take on a discussion about all of us have this expectation that life's going to get easier. And we keep waiting for things to get easier. Is this going to actually get easier? Is this going to get better? Is it going to get worse? And instead of worrying about things getting easier, we should embrace things being hard. And we should have those discussions. That is the discussion about being resilient. It is the discussion about being optimistically vigilant in the rearing of our kids, or the educating of our kids, or for law enforcement, the protecting of our kids. We should be optimistic about that, but while maintaining the appropriate level of vigilance. I promise you, you cannot be hyper vigilant all the time. Your kids want to grow and learn and experience. My parents had zero vigilance. Any Gen Xers who had their parents had zero vigilance? We were out all night doing I was either going to be a cop or a criminal, and so it worked out okay. And so that's what I would leave you with is walking away from here and all of this that you see, especially in the last week or so, and you see these constant swatting calls or issues related to threats on campus, it can force you into hypervigilance. I want you to guard against that. Be optimistic, but be vigilant about that, and continue to build great relationships with your young people and give them the tools, the intellectual tools, the conversational tools, the survival tools to understand that things aren't always going to be easy, or they're not going to be easier tomorrow. They might be harder tomorrow, and that's okay. We've got to embrace that. Life is hard, and we have the opportunity, I think, to build some resilience in that. But be vigilant, but do it with a smile on your face.
School safety is not just a district issue, it's not just a school issue, it's not just a law enforcement issue. This is a community-wide effort, and your participation, your presence here tonight is indicative of the strong relationship that we have and the participation of our partners in law enforcement. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Menzel, would you like to bring it home for us?
I would like to echo the words of appreciation. School safety is a shared responsibility, and we are incredibly blessed to have amazing partnerships with local law enforcement, with parents who care deeply about their children, with staff who are committed to not only having a safe learning environment, but to help ensure students are learning the right kinds of things through this process. And as we leave here, know that our lines of communication are open. We want to continue to hear from you. Every day, we want to get better. Our theme this year is to elevate excellence, reaching new heights together. Every day represents a new opportunity to strive for excellence in what we do. So it's together that we'll find a way forward, not easier, but we'll navigate these challenges, and we are fortunate to be in a community that knows how to come together when things really matter. So thank you for taking the time to be here this evening, and thank you for your commitment to the students of this district.